Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the career eulogy for Chris Weidman. I'm your boy, the Minister Jack Stack, and this is the Fights Gone By podcast. Yeah, that didn't work out very well. We did kind of say that was probably the most likely outcome. I mean, that's been the way that Chris has been fighting since Rockhold, basically. In fact, the Rockhold-Weidman fight just, I don't know. I suppose it's kind of like Evander Holyfield and Riddick Bowe, but they fought 3 times and kicked the shit out of each other, and then everyone else caught up with them in the meantime. Weidman and Rockhold fought once at the peak of the game, and then suddenly just weren't good anymore, or as good anymore. I mean, they're still good, they're just very, very hurtable. I think they've got a combined record of about 2-7 since that fight. Very, very sad. And one of 2 bad articles I read this week, but one of the worst articles I read this week was a piece on, I think it was Yahoo, and it was just like, was Chris Weidman ever actually good? Like, what a shit contrarian take. You know, it would be one thing if he suddenly just wasn't good anymore, but he's in these fights, fighting dudes, doing well. Even in this one, the things he did were decent. It just, as soon as he got hit, lights went out. But, you know, the previous ones, it was like he'd win a round or 2 rounds and then lose in the next round. If you can still put it on elite fighters, you're still an elite fighter. So, you know, the idea that he, lucked out in winning the UFC middleweight title is bizarre. But really, you know, that's taking the focus off the positive of this fight, which is that Dominic Reyes put on a blinding performance. You know, again, it's kind of like I've said for every single Dominic Reyes performance except for the Open Prue one. Just like, I'd like this to go a bit longer so that I actually know what I'm talking about. When I was writing the preview articles about him, it was like, yeah, this looks great, this looks great, this looks great, but he never ever goes past 1 round, so we have no idea how this holds up. And he often knocks people out in like the first or second exchange. Razor sharp counterpuncher though, like the Weidman landed a decent body kick, it looked like, and then he came in with a 1-2, and quite often against southpaw, because he fights southpaws constantly, he'll go right straight, and then he'll step in again and do another little right straight, and then drop on their hips along the fence. Did it to Machida and bounced him off the fence into the takedown, Randy Couture style. But he uses that double right straight a couple of times, actually, in notable fights that aren't the Anderson Silva, like spazzy, same right hand back fist thing. But yeah, like the counter punch was perfect. It was like, obviously Reyes was waiting on that, and he just fired it through the open side angle. That super dangerous punch that we're always talking about all the time, and it came in so quick that, you know, you didn't even see it. There could have just been a flash of light, and then still of the punch landing, and Chris Weidman going, "Nani!" sent him to the floor. Weidman starts to play De La Riva, starts to try and post on the hip and catch the other leg behind the knee for a tripod sweep. You'll see, like I said, there's a regional guy, Gegard Mousasi, does that, but Reyes just sort of shucked him by, so he was sweeping the air beside him, and lead hand back fist sort of as he fell. Like, you don't see that a lot. It's one you see guys sort of flailingly go for from inside another person's De La Riva, but you don't see De La Riva played an awful lot in fighting, to be honest. And I think, you know, the Crone Gracie fight the other day will tell you a little bit why that is, but it is, you're trying to control someone while they're standing over you, but while that's completely reasonable in jiu-jitsu, there are very few occasions where you really need to control someone standing over you in MMA, because ideally you want to be getting up as soon as you've got distance. So if the guy's not pressuring into you and either tripoded, which is, you know, very hard to get a De La Riva in on, or on his knees, which is impossible to get a De La Riva on, you're sort of, you don't really have much cause to engage him grappling wise. But then obviously Weidman was hurt, and Reyes was trying to come in on him and stand over him, so he tried to lace up his leg, but it's very loose guard, and you're finding this in no-gi as well. Like, guys who are amazing at De La Riva, like Keenan Cornelius, they will say, yeah, but it's kind of useless for no-gi. There's just not really... guys like... Well, I'm watching Lachlan Giles' new series at the moment. There's a lot to go through, but I'm really enjoying it. And he's doing a lot of stuff from underhook De La Riva, and Keenan does a lot of underhook De La Riva, Mantis stuff. But, again, I can't really see that being a huge help in MMA. It's a weird position, and it used to confuse Sakuraba. You know, that was cool. Alan Goes did it to Sakuraba, and Vitor then tried to do it to Sakuraba. And Sakuraba wasn't very good at passing the guard, so what he ended up doing was just like gimmicking his way around it. So he'd like kick the legs lots or do the running, jumping, stomp things. But he was never that good. And or the occasional cartwheel pass attempt, but he was never really that good at passing guard, especially if you kicked him out to standing. So that was one reason why you might want to stay prone on your back against someone who is standing over you. But again, we're putting a lot of stock in this, and the fact is that Weidman had been hit hard with a perfect counter, and he was pretty much out of it already. The takedown attempts I thought were good from Weidman. I mean, really what this fight said to me was that once you're dealing with bigger people, you can have the good technique, but you're still working at disadvantages. It's like when people say you don't need any strength if you've got technique. You're like, no, the whole thing is that it uses your strength most efficiently. You're still going to need strength because the other guy knows what he's doing, so you're going to be going strength against strength. But yeah, I mean, Reyes looked so big in there, and Weidman looked like he usually does. I didn't think he looked massive or anything. They put side-by-side photos of him weighing in at 205 and 185, and he just looked the same, which made me feel like maybe you don't want to see guys going up just because they're like, fuck it, I'm having so much trouble at middleweight, maybe I try any division, or maybe this will save me the hassle of cutting weight. You'd rather see guys get into really good shape so that they're maybe not having as hard a weight cut, but they're still a serious 205 size. But he took him down on the fence. Reyes immediately back to the fence, begins getting up. Weidman was trying to catch the far wrist across the back, get the far wrist right and fold him down Habib style, but just didn't control his legs. Reyes bounced right back up, tried to take him down again, sort of lost him. And then there was the striking exchanges that ended it. There was a really nice level change from Weidman. Like, this is the thing that I was saying last week. I was like, I'm going to be sad after this fight, but I know what I'll see. I'll see some cool stuff from Weidman technically, and then I'll see him lose. Because that's just how he goes now. He's getting more and more fragile. And he does tend to make mistakes too, but I'm not going to say this was a big mistake, getting caught with a wickedly fast counterpunch from a bigger man who somehow also moves faster than you. I'm going to say, but the level change when Reyes was moving in on him along the fence to begin with, because Reyes came out aggressive, he did almost what Sakuraba did to Igor Vovchanchin back in the day. He changed level, slid around behind him, and pushed him onto the fence, from his knees, basically. Demetrius Johnson used to do that from time to time, too. But yeah, what next for Dominic Reyes, then? I think we're all pretty much sold on him by now. This fight didn't add an awful lot for me. I knew that. Well, there was the whole we want to see him against a good wrestler thing, but when you're dealing with a fairly fragile middleweight coming up who's very much on the downside of his career, that's not as impressive as, say, well, I'm just looking down these rankings and there aren't an awful lot of great wrestlers in there. UFC rankings have him at number 4, ranked behind Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, and Daniel Cormier. So two other former middleweights between him and John Jones, and Daniel Cormier, who really, why is even ranked at light heavyweight? It's like Dominic Cruz being ranked perpetually number 7 at bantamweight. Makes no sense, but none of the rankings do because they're decided by a ballot of fools, a conspiracy of dunces working to make these rankings bad. There's not a lot you can do before John Jones. I mean, I'd say maybe give him a tune-up of some kind. I say tune-up against Anthony Smith, but Anthony Smith might just do his weird Anthony Smith magic. Maybe putting him against Anthony Smith. The whole thing is, we're waiting on finding out whether people want Thiago Santos to get a rematch, but also people don't want Thiago Santos to get a rematch. I'm confident if they fought again, maybe he could beat him, but equally, I'm like, where is the excitement there? No one was really excited about the first one either. The John Jones saga, I think, give him another defense. Maybe Jan Blachowicz he was talking about, if he gets past Jacare like he's supposed to. Give Israel Adesanya a defense, and then you had time enough to build up that quote-unquote super fight champ versus champ match that you desperately want to do. But Dominic Reyes is left sort of high and dry in the meantime because he's not really got much competition. I mean, Dominic Reyes versus Johnny Walker would be a ridiculous fight, and I think everyone could get on board with that. If you put that as a main event of a fight night or something, people would lose their shit. Fucking hell, Alexander Gustafsson's still ranked, and he's retired. Yeah, I mean, unless you do the Özdemir rematch or you book him against Corey Anderson, there's not really a lot going on here for Dominic Reyes. For Weidman, I'd like him to retire, if I'm honest, because, at least Rockhold, when he was most recently asked, he was like, I might never come back to fighting. Because, your health is a big deal. I mean, there's on the one hand, I love watching people punch each other in the head, and I do that for, I write about it for a living and talk about it for a living. But on the other, like, when a guy is clearly declining like that, physically, because it's the chin and stuff that's getting cracked every fight, really makes you want to just, I don't care how cool some of the technical stuff you do is, you're always going to be able to get hit, or you're always going to get hit if you get in a fist fight. So that's always going to be a problem. You're always going to be taking more damage. So what else was good on this card? Yair Rodriguez versus Jeremy Stephens was an absolute belter after all that build-up. And I said I was kind of bored of it last week. I think I said I was bored of just the drama and shit like around it. But Yair Rodriguez also kind of, the amount of spinny stuff without consequence kind of pisses me off sometimes. And Jeremy Stephens is the same with swinging wild at nothing. But these guys came out and really gave it to each other. Beautiful body kick in the second round from Yair Rodriguez. Body kick right into a hacking calf kick with the lead leg. I love guys who can calf kick with the lead leg like that. You have to be southpaw orthodox to do it, or orthodox southpaw. But Arnold Allen is another one who's great at that, like lead leg step up calf kick, and you got to be able to whip in that power in a very short space. And if you can do it, it's pretty fucking badass. I mean, that was Jerome Labanda's whole game, not the calf kick, but lead leg step up kicks, because he was a southpaw, but he was right-handed and really, really powerful. So he'd surprise people with these short stepping up kicks that just like buckled their leg. But Stephens, like, mad recovery. The thing about Jeremy Stephens is that if he were good technically and good tactically, he'd be incredible. But he gets by a lot on his physical abilities, and they are really something you can't just, like, sniff at. He is almost genetically made to fight. Like, he's incredibly durable. He's hard to take down just by merit of being a decent wrestler and really strong. And he hits really, really hard. He's just going to be there for the full length of the he's not been stopped since that Eve Edwards fight way back in the day. He doesn't always win, but he is always difficult. He's on a 3-fight losing streak now, if you don't include the no contests to break it up. But, I forgot that Aldo stopped him. But, generally, very, very tough man, and was very, very tough in this fight. Worked his way through. Firstly, we were talking about sexist stoppages last week, and I don't like to be the guy being like, oh, that's actually a sexist stoppage. But I joked about the Mazie Barber one against Jamie Colleen being bullshit, because she took about 3 elbows, and Herb Dean was like, no, it's too much. And we joked about the Aspen Ladd ones where she screams, and she's not actually hitting the lass. Like, she's missing her head, but because she's screaming, the referee will go, oh my god, she's committing a murder, and pull her off. But the Mazie Barber one on this, I'm calling her Mazie Barbar now, by the way. The Mazie Barbar one on this card was another one like that. Jillian Roberts did not take a shit ton of hard blows. She wasn't really stunned by any of them when she was covering up along the fence. She took some good elbows, but compare that stoppage to what whoever was reffing the Stephens-Rodriguez bout let Jeremy Stephens go through. And there was an awful lot of proof that being in on the single does make a difference, but that's mainly when you're like on your back, getting smashed. If you kick your leg out, your knee shield out or whatever, and you get up on the underhook and you're on the single, that makes a big difference. That buys you some time. They see that you're advancing position and doing something. If you're like face down in turtle and they're hammer fisting you in the side of the head and you're just holding onto the leg, that's a bit different. But yeah, scrambled through, got top position. Yair Rodriguez attempted a TP because Yair Rodriguez is just great fun from his back, provided you don't tripod him up against the fence. And then the round ended, and then the third round, Stephens managed to stay on him really well with the wrestling. And it came out as a unanimous decision. No complaints about that. I thought it was a good fight. Didn't really mind about the decision. A couple of people thought maybe you could have given Stephens the first round, and then if you gave the second round 10-8 to Yair because of the body kick and the damage, you could have ended up with a draw. But, we're not here fanning around about hypothetical scoring. That's not our gig on this podcast. Yair Rodriguez moved forward, and that's the best win of his career probably, because he had the one over Korean Zombie, but he was losing that fight until like Korean Zombie just decided to, as I said last time, just get retarded in the last 10 seconds. Up until that, we were still very much at a point where Yair Rodriguez was more hype than reality. But beating Stephens like that, very impressive. So looking at those featherweight rankings, they got Yair in at 7 at the moment, and Chan Sung Jung above him. Chan Sung Jung above him. Ortega's booked in with Zabit, I believe. Oh no, Ortega's booked in with the Korean Zombie, Aldo and Edgar are sort of like not really doing anything, and then Alexander Volkanovski's fighting Max Holloway. So there's not an awful lot of people above him that Yair Rodriguez can really fight, unless he waits for Zabit, and then we're back to that fucking drama of trying to get that fight together. But I suppose everyone wants it. I mean, maybe I was going to say Moicano because he's ranked number 9, but he's on a bad slump at the moment. Oh wait, who's Cater fighting? Oh, Cater's fighting Zabit. Ryan Hall? I don't know. Could be fun. You've got two guys who put all their points in kicking and weird ass grappling, but one guy is way more on the weird ass grappling end of the spectrum. One guy's way more on the kicking end of the spectrum. Or Mirsad Bektik. It'd be fun to see if Mirsad Bektik could lay on a guy with a guard like that. Yeah, no, he's going to be in an odd spot now because all those guys are booked, and he's got nothing to do really in the meantime. So really, he's going to have to take a fight that isn't an advancement, or he's going to have to sit on his thumbs. Sit on his thumbs? Sit on his hands? Twiddle his thumbs. Can sit on his thumbs if he enjoys it. And for Stevens, he just fights whoever comes up next. Fucking, I don't know, Shane Burgos, Arnold Allen, someone like that. Then what else do we have going? Oh, Greg Hardy versus Ben Sassali. Fight was shit, just so you know. This is the whole thing. Like, you're pushing Greg Hardy, and he's not good. He's not even entertaining. He's just throwing hard kicks at this dude, and they picked a big Aussie dude with a big hard head. And he was just like, nah, not bothered, mate. But he was also not really doing anything. Like, his corner going, double jab in and then throw the straight. And then he wings an overhand and runs past. And they're like, no, straighten it up. But, I mean, the real drama of this fight was Greg Hardy gassing out by the end of the second round and then going, where's my inhaler? To his corner. And his chief cornerman going, are you allowed to? And Greg Hardy goes, don't worry about it. And then asks a random dude who's in the cage, like, one of those dudes who's normally in the blazer. Well, I don't think he was in a blazer, but they're normally in those, like, Ron Burgundy maroon blazers at the MGM. But he asks him, and the other guy goes, are you allowed to? And he goes, is USADA approved? And uses it. And to be honest, it just came off like someone who has never faced any consequences for anything ever. It's just like, yeah, don't worry about it, he said to his coach as he cheated flagrantly. And then afterwards he put out a statement that was like, I did what I have always been taught to do. I asked an official. And if you watch it, he's not talking about asking an official beforehand in writing or something like that. He's talking about saying to a dude who was in the cage, am I okay to do this? It just came off like a dude who's never taken responsibility for anything in his life. Like even the knee to the head on the ground in his other fight. Just totally not his fault. And, he looked slightly less garbage than he has looked before in terms of, like, straightening up his punches and stuff. But he still looked garbage. And he's still lost it's been changed to a no contest now because of effectively the same thing as his other loss. He must know the rules. He just chose not to abide by them and then pretended that he hadn't been told afterwards. I didn't know that I couldn't do that, he said. So yeah, this fucking guy I was about to say it, but then I'm in the same boat as everyone else, and it's working. I was about to say, I can't wait for him to fight someone good and get smashed. And that's exactly what they want you to think. That's exactly what they want you to think, because they want you to watch him get knocked, or to tune in to watch him get knocked out. It's like Floyd Mayweather. His whole thing was being an arse so that you went, oh, I really hope Canelo stomps him, and then tune in, because the money goes straight to Floyd. Anyway, what else was good? Joe Lozon surprised in his comeback. I mean, I said Jonathan Pierce didn't look like a huge obstacle as he was debuting in the UFC. He was 9-3. He was on a 3-fight winning streak, I think, but just did not look nearly as cool, calm, and collected as Lozon. Lozon hit him with... We went after him with a straight right, I think it was 1-2, and then he followed up with a long jab that he threw out afterwards, like Kovalev. They step back when you throw the right hand, so you just fling that jab out after them. And you can snap their head back normally as they're moving out of range. And that seemed to be the one that stunned him, and then he hit him with I think it was a double 1-2. Went 1-2, and then went 1-2 again, and the second 2 hit him right on the chin. The guy tried to grab a hold, Lozon got a double underhooks, straight into the mat. And then the guy really seemed to be panicking because he was holding one of Joe's arms over the bicep, like if you're going to do a basic upper escape where you bridge to the side that you've got the arm. But then he tried to turn to his front the opposite way so that he left his arm behind, and Lozon had, what was it, a half Nelson? No, a reverse half Nelson. Hey, we get to use my favourite piece of trivia. A Nelson hold is called a Nelson hold because Admiral Nelson, to put the Nelson on someone was to give them a proper whooping. But there's the full Nelson, half Nelson, far Nelson, three-quarter Nelson. The full Nelson's the illegal one. Quarter Nelson is the one you'll see all the time defending singles. Half Nelson is less common in MMA, but Ronda Rousey's mum, what's her name? Fucking hell. She wrote a book with Jimmy Pedro, who's like a judo legend, and they basically said that there are two techniques that are super important to mastering grappling. I think one of them was the armbar, because Ronda, obviously, and the other one was the half Nelson, and they just went on for pages about how important the half Nelson is. Fedor used the half Nelson nicely against Heath Herring. He was trying to turn to his front from mount, and Fedor pinned him in place with the half Nelson and then cracked him over the head. That was nice. But anyway, reverse half Nelson, so basically just twisting this dude back on himself. And it was basically Frank Mir versus Brock Lesnar, but without the punching power. And Lozon didn't seem to be hitting him that hard, but it's one of those cool things like the mounted crucifix, where if you're not able to intelligently defend yourself, you shouldn't just be allowed to sit there and take 50 punches until the time expires, like Kimbo Slice versus James Thompson. If you can't defend yourself, if someone's put you in a position where you physically can't defend yourself, that should be a TKO. Mazie Barber versus Jillian Robertson. I think we talked about this one a little bit already, but yeah, weird. I mean, Mazie Barber, one of the things I really don't like about her style, she hits decently for a lass, which I like. She actually moves her shoulders and hips into it well. She snapping out elbows in the clinch. We were talking about that last week, was saying she's like Felicia Spencer in that regard. She's really good at throwing elbows when she is in close. Didn't pick her shots that well against Robertson in this one. She was just sort of like hammering her guard for a good period along the fence, and then threw an elbow again. But she didn't like dig to the body or anything, or land any low kicks or stuff like that. Wasn't as much like spamming of the high kick in this one, I suppose, because she respected the threat of the takedown. But the thing I really didn't like in this fight was that when Robertson shot, Barber would block it with her. She'd stuff it with her hands, and then she'd like be pushing on Robertson's collarbones even as Robertson came up. So she's got like straight arms out in front of her, and you're looking at that going, ooh, you know, it's a very handsy style of takedown defense. We said that about like Rumble Johnson too. I mean, Crocop was very handsy too, and that's why he fell victim to the Kevin Randleman fake shot left hook. But yeah, it can be very troublesome if you're, you know, they always say there's lines of defense, and that's true in the guard, but also in wrestling and other things like that. In wrestling, the lines of defense are like, you got your hands, your head, your footwork and movement and stuff, and then your hips are like the last line of defense, your sprawl. But your like digging underhooks and stuff or down blocking, it should be fairly far back on the list, as opposed to like denying grips, making sure they're out of position to shoot on you, using your feet and so on. I think that should be the case in MMA too. I think it's a very old-fashioned approach to just be like, I'll dig underhooks when they come at me, or I'll just push down on their head or whatever. I think you really need to be watching your footwork and stuff first. But, you know, she won the fight, and she won it convincingly, so no harm, no foul. I did like Jillian Robertson shooting the single, sitting down to half guard, and then coming up on the... you shoot the single, you grab the single, you sit down to the half guard, and then you've got to change your legs over so that your outside leg comes in over the top of their ankle, and then you've got to switch to a tight waist, so you go from the leg to around the waist, and then you can come up into that dogfight position, and that worked really well. It's cool that someone like Robertson can pull that off. You know, you don't, because I've seen Rafael Lovato do it, I've seen Damian Maia do it, I've seen Michele Nicolini do it. She did it against Angela Lee a little while ago, in a fight refereed by Olivia Cost. But now I've seen someone who's not like god tier grappler do it. Very good grappler, but not Rafael Lovato / Damian Maia / the most accomplished female jiu-jitsu player of all time, Michele Nicolini. Then you had Darren Stewart versus Deron Wynn. I mean, Darren is a very standard name. I think it should be Deron versus Duron with like D apostrophe Ron. Those are proper black names. But Darren Stewart versus Deron Wynn. And Deron Wynn, I was shocked to find out he missed weight for this one, but he had like visible abs, and I mean, Bellator heavyweights have visible abs, but like he clearly, a lot of what he's got is muscle. He's a unit. He's not like, it is absurd to be 5'5" and not be able to make middleweight, but equally, I think for him to lose some of that weight, he would have to give up some muscle mass, and being a strong 5'5" at middleweight is probably better than being a slightly less strong 5'5" at middleweight. But he's in a weird spot because he's built like a fucking fridge. And what you saw in this fight was just decent takedowns in the first round, but Stewart did a good job of protecting himself. Wasn't ever scared of the submissions. Win couldn't really hit him very well, because everyone, we said this last time, but everyone's going to get up eventually if you put them on the fence. It's being able to keep dishing out damage while they're getting up and then while you're dragging them down again. And Win didn't really have a way of delivering damage, so Stewart was just fighting his way back up, breaking free, and then jabbing him up. Did a nice Muhammad Ali move, which is hands down, left shoulder feint, right shoulder feint, moving in on both, and then flicking out the jab with no telegraph. You don't move your shoulders first, you move the hand first. Ali used to do that all the time. He'd also do left shoulder feint, right shoulder feint, not recover his right shoulder, and then just punch you with the right straight, but with no turn of the hips or shoulder. Really cool stuff. But, yeah, back and forth fight. Commentary seemed to think that Win had won. Judges felt that Stewart had won, or at least two of them did. I wouldn't be mad if Win won. I think I'd probably learn more from losing this one because he looked bad. For what I've seen of him, he looked bad. And Darren Stewart seemed like a cool guy. Glad for him to get a win and carry on doing whatever he's doing. What else happened? Charles Rosa versus Manny Bermudez was a weird example of the Yair Rodriguez principle. He had him along the fence in the guard, and he somehow still got armbarred, which shouldn't happen. If you're pressuring someone into the fence and crumpling them up, you shouldn't be able to get armbarred there, but he still somehow did. Molly McCann versus Diana Belbita, the Diet Biscuit. I was looking at Belbita's, the awful shadow box for the camera, please, shots, and I was going, ooh, I bet this lass is a grappler, and then she came out and they were like, oh, very slick striking from her. Molly McCann, she's good fun because she does lots of movement and she does the big overhand swings. She does the overhand left hook, she's like Igor Vovchanchin, but without the power. But yeah, it was a fun enough fight. It's just that I was aware that Belbita wasn't that good. I think that makes it 3 not that good opponents on the trot for Molly McCann. Who we got? Yeah, Priscilla Cachoeira, who's fucking awful. Ariana Lipski, and then Diana Belbita, who, again, wasn't that good. Having lost to Jillian Robertson in her first UFC fight. Randy Costa versus Boston Salmon was a mess. That was the bantamweight fight, but it looked like heavyweights because they were slipping over themselves. But got a good knockout out of that. Can't remember the Kevin Holland one. Can't remember these other 3. And then Sean Woodson was my standout of the night. Really weird build, but used it really well. Did the Zabit game plan against Bokniak, but didn't hit like a little girl. And Bokniak, it's weird watching him fight because the last round he's walking forward showboating and you're not achieving anything. You should be going hell for leather to get this guy down or to take his head off. And you're showboating at him like, come and get me because I'm ahead on the scorecards, even though I'm obviously not. So that was a bit odd. But, all in all, decent event. Obviously a little bit damaged by the loss of... it was Magomed Sharipov versus Calvin Kattar that was going to be on this one. But, not bad. So not a ton of news this week. Let's do a few questions instead. Jack Slack, would you consider uploading the deleted Filthy Casuals guides to your Patreon? Loved the one on our boy Curtis Millender. Becoming a member today, as he put out some of the best and most interesting fight content a boy like me could find. Thanks, Jack. Slack bless. I'm putting this in because this is a question I get a lot. No, I will not be putting up the Filthy Casuals guides for the Patreon boys. They are something I do completely unmonetized because that is part of the reason I can do them. They're fair use, they are analytical content, and I take them down just so the UFC can't bother me with takedown notices. I've challenged them on the one that they did take down, and I won. But if it's down for 4 weeks while that happens, what's the point? I'd rather just do current content and keep. What I can do is I'm working with people like KSW, who are very cool about using their footage. So things like the Roberto Soldic one can stay up, and I can have a selection of videos that will just be up all the time, and then I'll do current ones for the big UFC event and for people who are sniffy about copyright. But no, I will never be uploading them for Patreon boys or anything like that. I could recommend that you get yourself the YouTube DL MS-DOS application, which, unrelated to this conversation, is great if you want to archive a selection of YouTube videos on your own personal computer. But now we're getting into a tangent about something completely different. But the way we're doing it at the moment is 2 or 3 stay up, and then when a new one comes up, I take down the oldest one. If I'm honest, I'm looking at only really doing, well, for the foreseeable future, I'm only going to be doing them for like the pay-per-view events, unless something really jumps out at me that I want to do, because they're quite time-consuming, and like I said, I don't monetize them, and I also don't know how they're going to like go down. You know, it's a pain in the ass to do one and get like 10, 15,000 hits on it before the fight. When I do other ones and I get like 90,000, 100,000 hits on it before the fight, and you're going, well, I don't understand. Everyone knows who this dude is. What's happening? I think, I don't want to be one of those people who bitches about the algorithm, but I have no idea like how that sort of stuff works. So I wouldn't really know how to manipulate it, and I can't really be asked to learn. Cheers, Kyle. What's cracking, Jack Slacking? I was browsing Fight Pass and I saw Dan Henderson versus Hector Lombard was suggested to me. Wicked back elbow knockout, for those of you who can't remember that. Hector Lombard's probably won. I watched it and I saw Hector Lombard had a shin pad tattooed on his leg. Not really a question, I just wanted to remind you of this atrocious tattoo, your loyal servant Joe. That is a good shout, go look at it, it is hideous, but it's not quite as bad as Charlie Ward's just painting his whole arm black for no reason. It's just a block of black on his arm, and he's a really pasty dude to begin with, so it just looks like shit. But then that sums up Charlie Ward's style, really, doesn't it? Jack, Bane of Valentina Sycophant's master of the 52. I went back to watch Rampage vs. John Jones to get some new looks for my clinch game. As the irritating and vapid Mike Goldberg spewed his standard verbal diarrhea, Joe would often interject about Rampage's lack of leg kicks in his style. This led me to 2 questions for his fistic majesty. 1. Are there some fighters who, for whatever reason, might benefit from not using kicks at all? 2. I was impressed by Jones's use of frames after he kicked. How does one get around such an obstacle when attempting a post-kick counter? Your boy forever, Stefan. Struve, I assume. Yeah, okay, so kicking... Firstly, yeah, Rampage was having success with low kicks in that fight. It was something we all, like, touched on and said, oh, you can have some success with low kicks against John Jones. And then Thiago Santos was just like, well, now I'm only going to low kick. And he almost won the fight doing it, which no one really expected. But, I mean, I wrote 2 or 3 Killing the King John Joneses, and all of them featured the low kick and said, this will be important, but part of a comprehensive game plan. And then the dude comes out and just goes, no, I'm only using low kicks. But is there anyone who benefit from not using kicks at all? People who are terrified of getting taken down. But, you know, there's the downside of that is, like, the only reason you'd be absolutely terrified of being taken down is if you're not at all confident grappling or getting back up. And that's normally people who are, like, coming from a kickboxing background, and they're going to make their money striking on the feet. If you can't kick and you're a kickboxer, you're just punching at dudes, and it leaves you at a massive disadvantage, especially because even if you're the best kickboxer in the world and you go hands only against someone who's going legs and hands, and they're not useless, they will kick the shit out of you. So this is a theme with all my podcasts and writing and everything. Everyone should be using kicks. There's no one who can't benefit from using them. I'm not saying you have to have wicked low kicks, but just a stump. Everyone can low kick to some degree, and that will always open up opportunities for other stuff. Now, regarding posting on after kicks and stopping the opponent getting in on you, one I think of quite a lot is because there's not a lot of dudes framing very well anyway. One I think of quite a lot is Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum got in on him a couple of times off kicks. One of them he just sort of like rushed through, but there were a couple where he basically just parried the post. It was almost like he was wrestling. He was like dragging the arm off and then moving in and trying to hook. I think if you're moving forward, you know, you're going to feel the post against you. If you try and parry it and then get in with the other hand, you might be in good position. I think people do overcomplicate it. It's a physical barrier that the person's put on you, but you can move it. Like, you know, you just have to... You can't move it by moving straight onto it. You can move it from the sides. I'd be fascinated to see if... Well, I mean, it's very, very, very slippy in MMA, especially once you get past, like, the first or second round. But I'd be fascinated to see if someone could clear it and use a Russian 2-on-1 or something like that, and move into a clinch that way. Cheers, Stefan. Hey, Jack. With Paulo Costa now being in a good position for a middleweight title shot, the amount of pressure fighters at the top of the divisions seems to be increasing. I've noticed with Khabib, Usman and Colby that pressure wrestling has been very effective, but with Costa rising through the ranks and Carlos Diego Ferreira, oh my boy, recent good performance, I wonder if you think pressure is becoming a dominant part of the current meta. If it is this because pressure fighters have gotten better, or because a lot of fighters are now susceptible to pressure? Thanks from Dustin. P.S. Is Ferguson's front kick effective for pressuring in general, or just him? I think I've said this before, but like pressure fighting, I believe, is probably the most effective way to get a finish at high levels of combat sports. Because, we're not at the stage now where like Anderson Silva can stand in front of dudes and they don't know how to deal with someone who's just waiting to counter them. Counter fighting is magic until you realize that if you don't throw punches, they're not going to stop you. Or if you're throwing very cautious techniques like, stamping on their lead knee or flicking half-assed jabs and showing feints. Whereas pressure forces engagements. Even if you're a counter fighter, by pressuring someone, you can force them to throw back at you and then get on the counter. Conor McGregor did all his best work on the counter, but did it by getting in people's faces. But that's not to say it's magic. I mean, I used to point to Justin Gaethje as like a more chaotic version of that. He pressured dudes, he punted their legs, he ground them down. But his most recent fights have been sharper, slicker, quicker finishes because it's different. He's just sharpened up what he does, and I think generally he's got better across the board. But him constantly going forward was also kind of predictable. Dudes were timing him with body shots, moving offline, things like that. I think it largely depends on your tools, of course, what you can do, what you're already good at. If your whole thing is that you've got a wicked jab, you can pressure from behind a jab, but pressure fighting really is for better for putting together combinations, digging to the body, actually going for what we would term power punches or hurting blows, whereas jabbing's generally done better by leading the opponent around and being on the back foot. You wouldn't want someone to have to relearn everything and change their style up if they've got something good already. But I think it is consistently, it makes people make mistakes, and that's something that I picked up from Marcelo Garcia. He always says, always be attacking, which is, such a break with what I was always taught about jiu-jitsu from my early days, which is be defensive, be defensively sound and all that. And then Marcelo Garcia, who's the best of all time, was like, no, I just attack all the time because then they make mistakes. And I think that's true. If you keep on top of people, they make mistakes. And also, if you consider someone like Khabib, you could be doing the right thing, he could do the right thing to break you down, and then you could abandon the right thing because you didn't get up the first 2 times with it, It breaks people's wills in a way that standing back and counter-fighting and stuff doesn't. If you're having a good kickboxing match, someone might go to a stupid kick that they do 5 or 6 times without ever going that's not working, I'll give it up, because they're oh, it might work. If you put pressure on someone and you're hurting them the entire time, or you're taking them down, you're hitting them in the face, you're kicking them in the body, whatever, everything they do suddenly becomes, they have to go, is it worth trying that? And they make these decisions in their heads, and they suddenly get really almost paralyzed by it. Like Barboza in the last part of that fight, or Johnson. They were still trying to get up, but they were also doing they weren't doing it with anywhere near the confidence that they were doing it earlier, because they kept getting folded back down on that arm, or having their legs sat on and things like that. Getting paralyzed to the right options by the pressure. I would say that there are definitely people who shouldn't be pressure fighters because it is such a intense form of fighting. Khabib tears himself apart in training. He doesn't make it to the fight healthy half the time, but that's kind of what you have to do. If you fight like that, it's going to take its toll on you. If you look at all the best pressure fighters in boxing, because they're getting hit a lot of the time. You can cut down on the amount you're hit as the fight progresses because you're taking it over, but you're still there to get hit. It's not like if you're gliding around being defensively savvy and smooth and tying up every time the opponent gets close. You're there using your presence to pressure the opponent. You have to be there as a target to do that. So people like Joe Frazier, Ricky Hatton, people like that, they have a very obvious drop off because it takes a massive toll on you, like your body and your reactions and brain and stuff. Also, guys like that are probably going to burn out of training quicker because Ricky Hatton's training camp habits and his habits after camps, between camps, were dreadful. He treated himself awfully because he put himself through such a hard time in camp. To fight at that sort of pace, the sort of pace that tires out professional fighters who are professional athletes and are in condition anyway, is really hard work. I think what would be best, I think, is for career longevity / meeting that point of career longevity and effectiveness crossover. I think the sort of person who can pick when they want to pressure, when they need to pressure. And that doesn't mean just like against certain opponents. That means certain rounds you put the pressure on. I think that this sort of like constant, straightforward stuff is really going to take its toll on these fighters quite quickly. Khabib's only like 28 fights into his career, but he's already talking about retiring because he's had so many injuries and things. Tony Ferguson obviously has had a few injuries in his own right, but I mean, you can't take like severing ACL while tripping on cable as a thing like that. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys ended up having the sort of drop, that Weidman Rockhold style drop off. Even though those guys weren't really pressure fighters. On the subject of Ferguson's push kick or front kick or whatever it is, yeah, no, it's great. It's fantastic. I mean, McGregor does the same thing. If you front kick on offense, you do have the problem with the opponent catching the leg, which is what he had against Chad Mendes, and he had to sort of like jump backwards and try and kick it free. But it's such a long weapon, and you can keep harassing people with it. And that's the main thing with pressure fighting. It's not always hurting people, it's harassing them constantly, which is a great phrase, harassing. Apparently the Danaher guys use it for like when they're playing seated guard, they go after the opponent's legs. They do those jumping, what's it called, the idiot sweep, where you put both feet hook on the inside of the opponent's ankles, and you push them backwards. It's a Marcelo Garcia thing too. But yeah, they're like, it's again that staying aggressive thing. They say we harass the legs from the bottom. Harassment is what pressure's about. I think we'll see some more pressure fighters, but I think it's quite hard to do it well. You've seen people like Brunson decide that staying on top of people and overwhelming them is the best idea, but then in between they have very little care for their own safety, and they really overdo it. It's very hard to... One of the things that I do quite appreciate about Khabib is that he does take care of himself quite well on the feet while moving forward. It's hard to apply pressure and also keep yourself safe, especially if people know you're just going to dive in after their legs every time. Anyway, that's enough of that. Thanks, Dustin. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. We'll be back on Thursday. Got some stuff coming for the Patreon boys this week. Put up a couple of articles about boxing last week, about this weekend's event, which is the final of the Super Series between Prograis and Taylor. And also there's a fight between David Price and Derek Chisora, which promises like a fainting goat-style knockout, probably. So yeah, if you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonepodcast@gmail.com. If you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. And if you want to support the podcast, go ahead and join the Patreon. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Chris Weidman is still my boy.